Widow cries upon seeing what happened to her inheritance, but is moved by what was hidden. Rebecca Mitchell held her 8-month-old baby firmly in her arms, while her 3 older children walked silently beside her on the dirt road. She had lost her husband just 2 weeks ago, and now needed to face the reality of the inheritance he had left behind. When they finally reached the rusty iron gate, Rebecca felt tears welling in her eyes. The property that Daniel, her late husband, had bought with all the family's savings was completely unrecognizable. The 2-story house, which in old photographs looked imposing and well kept, was now completely taken over by a thick layer of moss and vines, covering everything from the roof to the windows. "Mommy, is this where we're going to live?" asked Brandon, her 9-year-old son, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Rebecca swallowed the lump in her throat and tried to maintain her composure. She couldn't show despair in front of the children, even though inside she felt lost and betrayed. Daniel had never mentioned that the property was in such a state of neglect when he bought it 6 months before his passing. "It's our new home," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Tyler, 7 years old, approached the fence and tried to peek through the holes in the vegetation covering the grounds. Little Emma Grace, 5 years old, hid behind her mother's black skirt, obviously frightened by the gloomy appearance of the place. The family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, had been clear during the reading of the will. The property in Green Valley, in the interior of Los Angeles, was all that Daniel had left. There was no bank account, no life insurance, just that century-old house and the 15,000 square meters of land surrounding it. "Let's go in and see what it's like inside," said Rebecca, more to herself than to the children. The gate made a screeching noise when she opened it. Rust had taken over the hinges, and she had to use all her strength to move it. Baby Ethan began to cry, as if sensing his mother's anxiety. As they walked along the trail covered with tall weeds leading to the main entrance, Rebecca noticed there were partially visible structures under all that vegetation. They seemed to be remnants of a garden that was once organized, with stones arranged in geometric patterns and what remained of some fruit trees. The front door was locked, but the ground floor windows had only been protected by wooden boards nailed from the outside. Tyler found a rock and, following his mother's instructions, broke the glass of a side window so they could enter. The smell of mold and dampness hit them immediately. Rebecca covered the baby's nose with a cloth, while the other children followed her inside the house. The light coming through the cracks between the boards revealed a scene even more desolate than she had imagined. The house was completely empty. There was no furniture, no appliances, not even working electrical installations. The walls showed stains of dampness, and in some places the plaster had completely come off, leaving the bricks exposed. "Mommy, where are we going to sleep?" asked Emma Grace, her eyes watery. Rebecca took a deep breath. She had only $300 in her pocket, some clothes in a small suitcase, and 4 children depending on her. There was nowhere to go back to. The house they had lived in Asheville had been rented, and with Daniel's passing, she couldn't afford another month's rent. "We'll figure it out," she replied, hugging her daughter. "Daddy must have had a good reason for buying this place." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following days, Rebecca worked tirelessly to make at least one room in the house habitable. With the help of her children, she managed to clean and seal off one of the ground floor rooms, using plastic sheets and tape to cover the broken windows. Brandon proved surprisingly helpful for his age, helping to carry gallons of water from the well they discovered in the backyard. The well still worked, which Rebecca considered a small blessing amid so many difficulties. On the 3rd day at the property, while trying to pry loose some boards blocking one of the kitchen windows, Rebecca heard the sound of a car approaching. For the first time since she had arrived, she saw another human being. A man of about 40, well-dressed and driving a black car, stopped in front of the gate and honked. Rebecca set the hammer aside and went to him, carrying Ethan on her hip. "Good morning," said the man, getting out of the car with a smile she found overly friendly. "My name is Richard Sanders. I'm a real estate agent in the area. I heard you are the new owner of this house." "I am," replied Rebecca, keeping some distance. How can I help you? Actually, I came here to help you, said Richard, taking a card from his pocket. I know the Green Valley real estate market well, and I have some clients who might be interested in this property. Rebecca looked at him suspiciously. The property is not for sale. I completely understand, continued Richard, walking toward the gate as if he had been invited in, but you need to understand that maintaining a property in this condition is very expensive. Just to make it habitable would require an investment of at least $100,000. How do you know what condition the property is in? Asked Rebecca, narrowing her eyes. Richard seemed slightly uncomfortable with the question. Well, it's a house that's been abandoned for decades. It's easy to imagine. Decades? Rebecca felt her heart speed up. But my husband bought it just 6 months ago. Ah, yes, of course, Richard corrected himself quickly. What I mean is it was abandoned before your husband bought it. He didn't have time to do the necessary renovations, right? Rebecca didn't answer, but mentally noted the strangeness of the situation. How did this man know about Daniel and how long he'd had the property? Look, said Richard, adopting a more serious tone, I have a client who is willing to pay $150,000 for this property, even in the state it's in. It's a very generous offer, considering you wouldn't have to invest anything in renovations. I said it's not for sale, repeated Rebecca firmly. Think about your situation, insisted Richard. You have 4 small children. With this money, you could buy a much better house in Asheville or Boulder, in an area more suitable for children. Thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested, said Rebecca, turning to leave. The offer will remain open, Richard called after her as she walked away, but perhaps not for long. That night, while the children slept on the floor of the makeshift room on some blankets she had gotten in town, Rebecca lay awake thinking about the conversation. There was something strange about Richard's insistence and the way he seemed to know details about her situation. The next day, she decided to explore the property more. She left Ethan sleeping under Emma Grace's care and took the boys to investigate the land. That's when she discovered the property was much larger than she had imagined. Besides the main house, there was a smaller structure in the back that appeared to have been a caretaker's cottage or storage shed. It was in better condition than the main house, with the roof still intact and structurally sound walls. Look, Mom, shouted Tyler, who had gone inside the smaller building. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Rebecca ran over and found something that left her stunned. The small building was full of agricultural tools, carefully stored bags of seeds, and several boxes stacked against the walls. Brandon opened one of the boxes and found papers. Mum, there are a lot of letters here. Rebecca picked up some of the letters and realized they were all addressed to Daniel. The dates showed he had been corresponding with various people over the last 2 years, long before she had known about the property. One of the letters caught her attention. It was from an agronomist in Saratoga Springs, dated 3 months before Daniel's departure. Dear Daniel, as per our conversation, I confirm that the soil on the property is excellent for cultivating the varieties we discussed. The tests we conducted in September showed ideal pH and abundant nutrients. I believe the project you have in mind could be very successful, especially considering the property's strategic location. As agreed, I will maintain absolute confidentiality about our plans until you decide to reveal them to your family. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, trying to process the information. Daniel had been planning something for that property, something he had kept secret from her for 2 years. Why hadn't he told her about his plans? And more importantly, what kind of project did he have in mind? She continued rummaging through the boxes and found more correspondence. There were letters from agricultural equipment suppliers, from a bank discussing financing for a sustainable agriculture project, and even from other families interested in being part of the Green Valley farming community. Mom, what are these letters? Asked Brandon, noticing the confused expression on her face. Your father was planning something, answered Rebecca, still in a state of shock. Something he didn't tell me about. That afternoon, an elderly woman appeared at the property's gate. She was thin, with completely white hair pulled into a bun, and wore a simple floral print dress. Excuse me, she said as Rebecca approached. My name is Mrs. Eleanor. I live in the yellow house up there on the hill. I came to see if you need anything. Rebecca was surprised by the gesture. Since she had arrived, no neighbor had approached to introduce themselves. In fact, she had noticed curious looks and some whispers when she passed through the area's only commercial street, but no one had shown any kind of receptiveness. "Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor. I'm fine, just trying to adjust." "Are you the widow of Daniel Mitchell?" asked the elderly woman, with an expression mixing curiosity and sympathy. "You knew my husband?" "I knew him when he was a boy," answered Mrs. Eleanor with a nostalgic smile. "He used to come here on vacations to visit his grandmother who lived on this very property." Rebecca felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "His grandmother lived here? He never told me that." "The house belonged to the Baker family for 3 generations," explained Mrs. Eleanor. "When Mrs. Constance, Daniel's grandmother, passed away 15 years ago, the property was abandoned because there were no direct heirs interested in keeping it." "But Daniel was her grandson. Why didn't the property automatically go to him?" "Because at that time he was very young and was living in Los Angeles," explained Mrs. Eleanor. "The family decided to sell to an investor who promised to turn the property into an inn, but the project never got off the ground. The house remained abandoned all these years until your husband managed to buy it back last year." Rebecca was trying to process all these revelations when Ethan started crying inside the house. She apologized to Mrs. Eleanor and ran to get the baby. When she returned, she found the elderly woman watching Brandon and Tyler play in the backyard with dry branches. "They're beautiful children," said Mrs. Eleanor. "They remind me so much of Daniel when he was little." "You said he used to come here on vacations?" "Every December and January," confirmed the neighbor. "He was a very bright boy, always asking about the plants, about how to grow the fruits that grew here naturally. His grandmother used to say he had gardener's hands." "What kind of fruits?" asked Rebecca, remembering the seeds she had found in the storage room. "Oh, there was everything. Jaboticabas, Suriname cherries, some varieties of mango that aren't easily found nowadays, and Mrs. Constance's specialty was blackberries. She had a very rare variety, almost black, extremely sweet. People came from far away to buy her blackberries." Rebecca felt her heart race. In the correspondence she had found, one of the letters mentioned rare blackberry varieties with exceptional commercial potential. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, "would you be able to tell me if those plants still exist here on the property?" The elderly woman walked a few steps toward what looked like just tall weeds and pointed to a specific area. "If my memory serves me right, there was an orchard over in that direction. It must be all overgrown now, but fruit tree roots are resilient. It's possible they're still alive under all that vegetation." That night, after the children were asleep, Rebecca took a flashlight and went out to explore the area Mrs. Eleanor had indicated. With a machete she found in the storage room, she began cutting the tall weeds, looking for signs of the old trees. After almost an hour of work, her perseverance was rewarded. Under a thick layer of vines and wild bushes, she found the trunk of a tree that still showed signs of life. There were new shoots growing on some branches, and when she scraped the bark with her nail, she found the wood green and moist underneath. It was a blackberry tree, exactly as Mrs. Eleanor had described, and it wasn't the only one. As she continued exploring with the flashlight, Rebecca discovered there were at least a dozen fruit trees still alive under all that seemingly dead vegetation. The discovery filled her with a hope she hadn't felt in weeks. Perhaps Daniel had truly seen something in that property that she hadn't been able to see initially. Perhaps there was a real possibility of building a life there. However, her hope was temporarily shaken the next day when Richard returned. This time, he wasn't alone. He had brought an older man in a dark suit whom he introduced as my associate, Dr. Frank Thompson. "Mrs. Rebecca," said Richard, adopting a more serious tone than the first time, "I came here because I received concerning information about your situation." "What kind of information?" asked Rebecca, holding Ethan firmly in her arms. "It has come to my attention that you are attempting to live on this property with 4 small children," said Dr. Frank, taking a briefcase from the car. "As citizens concerned with child welfare, we feel the need to alert you to the risks this poses." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. "I don't understand what you're getting at." "The property lacks minimum living conditions," continued Dr. Frank. "There is no electricity, the plumbing system is precarious, and the house structure presents evident risks of collapse. Keeping children in these conditions could be considered neglect. I'm working to improve the conditions, replied Rebecca, trying to keep her voice steady. With what resources? Asked Richard. Do you have the money to make the necessary repairs? Rebecca didn't answer, because the answer was obvious to everyone present. Look, Mrs. Rebecca, said Dr. Frank, opening his briefcase and taking out some papers, we don't want to create problems for you. On the contrary, we want to help. My client is willing to increase the offer to $200,000 for the property. With this money, you can secure a much better future for your children. And if I refuse? In that case, said Dr. Frank, showing the papers, we will be obliged to inform the competent authorities of our concern about the conditions in which the children are being kept. Rebecca looked at the papers and saw they were complaint forms for the Child Welfare Council. Her blood ran cold. The threat was clear. Accept the sale or risk losing custody of her children. How much time do I have to think? She asked, feeling her legs tremble. 72 hours, replied Dr. Frank. After this deadline, we will be obliged to take the necessary measures to protect the children. After the two men left, Rebecca locked herself in the makeshift room with her children and cried, as she hadn't cried since the day Daniel had left. She felt cornered with no options, betrayed by circumstances and by life itself. Brandon, sensing his mother's despair, approached and hugged her. "Mommy, we don't need to live in a pretty house," he said. "We just need to stay together." Her son's words touched Rebecca's heart deeply. At that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. No matter what happened, she would not give up the property without a fight. Daniel had left that place to her for a reason, and she was going to find out what it was. That night, after the children fell asleep, she went back to the storage room to examine Daniel's correspondence more carefully. That's when she found a letter that had gone unnoticed the first time. It was a letter from Daniel himself, addressed to her, with instructions to be opened only when the right time came. With trembling hands, Rebecca opened the envelope and began to read. "My dear Rebecca, if you are reading this letter, it means something has happened to me, and you have discovered our refuge. I know you must be confused and perhaps even angry that I didn't tell you about this place before. I ask for your understanding. This property is not just a house. It is the realization of a dream I have cherished since childhood. It is the place where I grew up spending the happiest vacations of my life with my grandmother Constance. When I learned there was a possibility to buy back the family land, I couldn't resist. For the last 2 years, I have been working secretly to prepare this place for our family. I didn't tell you before because I wanted it to be a surprise, and also because I knew you would find the project too risky. In the storage room, you will find seeds of rare varieties I managed to obtain through contacts in the specialized agriculture world. Some of these species have exceptional commercial value in today's market. With the right care, they can generate significant income for our family. I have also established contacts with several families who are interested in participating in a sustainable farming community. The idea is to create a kind of cooperative where each family would be responsible for a specialty: fruits, vegetables, dairy, etc. If something happens to me before I can implement this plan, I ask that you consider carrying it forward. I know it will be difficult, especially at the beginning, but I believe this project can offer a better life for our children than anything we could achieve in the city. Under the third floorboard in the storage room, you will find resources I specifically saved for the project's initial costs. Use the money wisely. Rebecca, I know I am guilty of not sharing this with you from the start, but I did everything out of love for our family. This place is our chance to give our children a life connected to the land, to the values that truly matter. Trust me one last time. With all my love, Daniel." Rebecca read the letter 3 times before she could fully process its content. Daniel had not been irresponsible in buying the property. He had meticulously planned an entire future for the family. With renewed determination, she grabbed a hammer and headed to the storage room. After a few precise strikes, she managed to lift the 3rd floorboard and found a metal box buried in the ground. Inside the box, there were $25,000 in cash, plus a series of documents detailing Daniel's plan. There were already signed contracts with suppliers, contact information for families interested in the cooperative project, and even architectural plans for renovating the property. Rebecca spent the night reading every document, every plan, every dream that Daniel had carefully crafted. For the first time since his passing, she felt truly connected with her husband again. The next day, instead of waiting for the 72 hours that Richard had stipulated, she decided to take the initiative. She took the most important documents, put on her best clothes, and went into town to look for a lawyer. Dr. Andrew Richards's office was located in a small room above a pharmacy. He was a young lawyer, recently graduated, who had returned to Green Valley to open his first independent practice. "Mrs. Baker," he said after hearing Rebecca's entire story, "what these men are doing is called coercion. It's a crime." "But they are right about the condition of the house," argued Rebecca. "It really isn't suitable for children at the moment." "That is true, but threatening to report you to the Child Welfare Council as a way to pressure a sale is completely illegal," explained Dr. Andrew. "Furthermore, I have information about this Richard Sanders that may interest you." The lawyer picked up a folder from his desk. "He isn't exactly a common realtor. He represents a construction company that is trying to acquire several properties in the area to build a luxury condominium. He has already managed to buy 4 plots using questionable tactics, similar to the one he's using with you." Rebecca felt anger growing inside her. "Does this mean I can sue him?" "We can, yes. But first, I suggest you work on regularizing your situation. Take this money you found and make the minimum necessary renovations to make the house habitable. That way, when the Child Welfare Council comes to do the visit they inevitably will, they will find adequate conditions. How much time do I have?" "With the money you have, and if we focus only on the essentials, 2 weeks should be enough to install electricity, fix the basic plumbing, and make 2 or 3 rooms completely habitable." Rebecca left the lawyer's office with a clear plan of action. First, she would make the necessary renovations. Then, she would gradually implement the project Daniel had planned. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. For the next 10 days, Rebecca worked as she had never worked in her life. She hired an electrician and a plumber from town, and she herself did all the cleaning and basic painting work. Mrs. Eleanor offered to take care of the children during the most intense periods of work. Brandon and Tyler proved to be surprisingly helpful assistants. They carried tools, organized materials, and even learned to mix paint. Emma Grace was responsible for entertaining baby Ethan while the adults worked. During this period, Rebecca also began implementing the first phase of Daniel's agricultural project. With the help of Mrs. Eleanor, who revealed extensive knowledge about farming, she started clearing and preparing the land where the still living fruit trees were. "Your husband chose the seed varieties well," commented Mrs. Eleanor, examining the packages Rebecca had found in the storage room. "Some of these species are highly valued by chefs and specialized restaurants." "How do you know that?" asked Rebecca, impressed by her neighbor's knowledge. "Before I retired, I worked as a consultant for rural producers in the region," explained Mrs. Eleanor. "I helped small landowners identify crops with good commercial potential. When I saw the seeds your husband selected, I realized he really did his research well." The revelation about Mrs. Eleanor's professional past was a pleasant surprise for Rebecca. Having an experienced consultant as a neighbor was a valuable resource she hadn't expected. Exactly 2 weeks after Richard's last visit, a municipal social worker appeared at the property to assess the children's living conditions. Rebecca received the visit with confidence. The main house now had electricity working in 3 rooms, running water in the kitchen and a renovated bathroom, and 2 completely habitable bedrooms with proper beds for the children. "I'm impressed with the progress you've made in such a short time," said the social worker, Mary Jane. "When I received the anonymous complaint, I expected to find a much more precarious situation." "Anonymous complaint?" asked Rebecca, though she already knew who was responsible. "Yes, someone claimed there were children living in unsanitary conditions, but I can clearly see that's not true. The house is clean, the children look healthy and happy, and you demonstrate having the resources to continue improving the property." After the social worker left with a positive report, Rebecca felt victorious for the first time since she had arrived at the property, but her peace was short-lived. That afternoon, Richard appeared again, this time with a much more aggressive expression than on previous visits. "I see you managed to do some renovations," he said, looking around with evident disappointment. "As you can see, I no longer need to worry about the threats you made," replied Rebecca, standing firm. "Threats?" Richard gave a false smile. "Mrs. Rebecca, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just concerned about your well-being and that of the children. And now that you can see we are well, I imagine your concerns have been resolved." "Actually, no," said Richard, pulling new papers from his pocket. "You see, I discovered something interesting about this property. It seems there are some irregularities in the transfer documents." Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of irregularities?" "Problems with the registration of previous taxes. Apparently, when your husband bought the property, some debts weren't properly settled. This means there might be a tax foreclosure process underway." "That's impossible," said Rebecca, though she was already beginning to doubt. "I have a copy of the documents here," said Richard, extending the papers. "The debt is approximately $100,000. If it's not settled within 30 days, the property will be auctioned." Rebecca took the documents with trembling hands. They looked official, with stamps and signatures she couldn't identify as forged. "But there is a solution," continued Richard. "My client is still willing to purchase the property for the original offer. He would assume all debts, and you would be free of any commitment." "I need to have my lawyer review these documents," said Rebecca. Of course, but don't take too long. The legal deadlines are strict in these situations." After Richard left, Rebecca rushed to town with the documents. Dr. Andrew examined them carefully for over an hour before giving his opinion. "These documents are very well-made forgeries," he finally said, "but there are small details that give them away. The stamps are from agencies that changed their names 5 years ago, and some of the signatures don't match the official records. So there is no outstanding debt?" "Exactly. Your husband paid all the taxes correctly when he made the purchase. I personally verified all the original documentation when you hired me." Rebecca felt a mix of relief and indignation. "What can I do about these forgeries?" "We can file a complaint for document forgery and attempted fraud," replied the lawyer. "But I suggest you first focus on strengthening your position. The more established you are on the property, the harder it will be for them to continue with these tactics." Rebecca returned home determined to accelerate the implementation of Daniel's project. If Richard and his associates wanted a war, she was prepared to fight. During the following week, she followed the detailed instructions Daniel had left to plant the first specialized seeds. Mrs. Eleanor helped her prepare beds with the exact soil, pH, and drainage specifications that each variety required. It was during this work that they made an extraordinary discovery. While clearing a specific area of the land that was indicated in Daniel's plans, Rebecca found evidence that the soil preparation work had already begun. "Look at these marks in the earth," said Mrs. Eleanor, pointing to regular furrows that became visible after they removed the surface vegetation. "Your husband was here recently preparing the ground." "But when?" asked Rebecca. "He never mentioned coming here alone." "By the condition of the soil, I'd say it was about 3 or 4 months ago," assessed Mrs. Eleanor. "He did very professional work. The soil is perfectly prepared to receive the seedlings." The discovery revealed that Daniel had invested much more time and effort into the project than Rebecca had imagined. He hadn't just planned everything theoretically, but had begun the practical implementation months before his departure. As they planted the first seeds, Mrs. Eleanor shared more memories of Daniel as a child. "He was always very determined," she said. "When he decided he wanted to learn something, he wouldn't rest until he had completely mastered it. I remember one summer when he was obsessed with learning to graft different fruit varieties onto the same tree. He spent 3 months experimenting until he succeeded." "He never told me about this interest in agriculture," said Rebecca, feeling a pang of sadness at discovering there were aspects of her husband she hadn't known. "Perhaps because in the city there was no opportunity for it," suggested Mrs. Eleanor. "But I can assure you that the love for the land was always in his heart." That night, Rebecca found more letters from Daniel that she had missed in her first search. One of them was particularly touching, addressed specifically to her. "Rebecca, my love, I know discovering all this must be confusing for you. I want you to know that keeping this project a secret was the hardest decision I've ever made. Every day I wanted to share with you the excitement I felt seeing our plans taking shape. But I also know how practical and cautious you are, qualities I've always admired in you, and I feared you might find the project too risky, especially with 4 young children. My hope was to be able to show you the first concrete results before revealing everything. I wanted you to see the plants growing, the contacts established, the real potential of what we can build here. If anything happens to me before that, I ask you to consider giving the project a chance, not just for the money it could generate, but for the kind of life it could offer our children. I want them to grow up knowing where food comes from, understanding the value of working the land connected to nature in a way our generation lost. This place can be more than a house, Rebecca. It can be a true home, built with our own hands, where every fruit harvested and every challenge overcome strengthens our family. Trust me. Trust us. Daniel." Reading that letter, Rebecca finally understood her husband's vision completely. It wasn't just an economic project, but a life project, a way to put down true roots for the family. Her determination was tested again a few days later, when 2 men who identified themselves as municipal inspectors appeared on the property. "Mrs. Mitchell," said one of them, a burly man in an official-looking uniform, "we've received complaints about irregular agricultural activity on this property." "Irregular activity?" asked Rebecca. "I'm just planting some fruit for family consumption." "According to our information, you are starting a commercial operation without the proper permits," said the second inspector, consulting a clipboard. "This is a violation of municipal regulations." Rebecca looked around at the small bed where she had planted some blackberry seedlings. It was impossible for that to be characterized as a commercial operation. "May I see your identification documents?" she asked, remembering her lawyer's advice to always verify the legitimacy of any official claim. The 2 men exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Our badges are being renewed," said the first, "but I can assure you we are legitimate public servants." "Then you won't mind if I call City Hall to confirm your identities," said Rebecca, taking her phone from her pocket. "That won't be necessary," said the second man quickly. "We just came to give a preventive warning. If you keep the activities on a small scale, for family consumption, there will be no problems." The 2 men left hurriedly, and Rebecca was certain they were another attempt at intimidation orchestrated by Richard. His persistence was beginning to reveal the real value he saw in the property. Determined to fully understand the motives behind so much interest, Rebecca decided to conduct her own investigation. She went to City Hall and asked to consult the records of approved urban development projects for the region. What she discovered left her shocked. There was an approved project to build a large residential complex in the area that included not only her property, but also several adjacent lots. The project was in the name of a company called Green Valley Real Estate Development, and Richard Sanders appeared as the legal representative. The planned complex included 200 luxury homes, a recreation area with pools and tennis courts, and a shopping center. The estimated value of the project was $50 million. Rebecca finally understood why Richard was so desperate to acquire her property. It was located right in the center of the area designated for the project. Without her property, the entire plan would be unfeasible. Armed with this information, she returned home and called Dr. Andrew. "Doctor, I found out why they want my property so badly," she said, explaining about the real estate project. "This completely changes our strategy," replied the lawyer. "If they have an approved project that depends on your property, it means your negotiating position is much stronger than we imagined." "How so?" "You can demand fair compensation for the property's real value in the context of the project, or you can simply refuse to sell and force them to redesign the development," explained Dr. Andrew. "In any case, the intimidation tactics they're using become even more illegal." Rebecca decided to use this information strategically. Instead of confronting Richard immediately, she continued implementing Daniel's project while documenting all intimidation attempts. During the following weeks, she received visits from supposed health inspectors, environmental inspectors, and even a man who identified himself as a representative from the National Social Security Institute, claiming irregularities in the property's labor documentation. With each visit, Rebecca asked for official identification and offered to verify the legitimacy of the claims directly with the responsible agencies. In every case, the inspectors left quickly when they realized she wouldn't be intimidated easily. Parallel to this psychological war, the agricultural project began to show the first positive results. The blackberry seedlings planted according to Daniel's specifications germinated with exceptional success, and the fruit trees rescued from neglect began to bloom again. Mrs. Eleanor brought a friend, Mr. Charles, who was an expert in organic agriculture and was impressed with the soil quality and the selection of varieties Daniel had planned. "This man really knew what he was doing," said Mr. Charles, examining the blackberry seedlings. "This specific variety could be worth up to $20 per kilo in the specialty market. With the land you have, well managed, you could produce about 2 tons per year." Rebecca did the math mentally. $40,000 a year just from the blackberries, not counting the other fruits that were planned. Daniel's project was truly economically viable. "How long until the first harvest?" she asked. "For the blackberries, about 8 months," replied Mr. Charles. "For the trees you rescued, some might already produce next season if they receive proper care." The prospect of economic independence in less than a year completely renewed Rebecca's confidence. She wouldn't just resist Richard's pressures, she would build something lasting for her children. It was around this time that she decided to implement another part of Daniel's plan, to contact the families who had shown interest in joining the agricultural cooperative. The first family to respond positively was the Collins family from Boulder. Robert and Carol Collins had 2 teenage children and were looking for an opportunity to leave urban life to dedicate themselves to sustainable agriculture. "Daniel wrote to us 6 months ago talking about this project," said Robert during the first visit to the property. "We were very interested in the proposal of a community where each family would have its specialty." "What would your specialty be?" asked Rebecca. "Organic vegetables and dairy," replied Carol. "We have experience with both, and Daniel had suggested we establish a partnership for joint distribution of products." The conversation with the Collins family revealed how much Daniel had advanced in structuring the cooperative. He had identified families with complementary skills, established preliminary agreements for cost and profit sharing, and had even begun negotiating supply contracts with restaurants in the region. "Daniel was very organized," said Robert. "He had detailed spreadsheets showing how each family could contribute and how much each could earn from the project." During the following weeks, 2 more families contacted Rebecca: the Bakers, who were not related to her, specializing in honey and propolis, and the Millers, who worked with medicinal herbs and spices. As the cooperative project took shape, Richard's intimidation attempts intensified. He began showing up at the property almost daily, sometimes alone, sometimes accompanied by different people. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said during one of these visits, "I need to warn you about something serious. This region is going to undergo major development in the coming months. Many properties will increase in value, but there will also be a lot of construction activity, noise, dust. It might not be the ideal environment for young children." "Thank you for your concern," Rebecca replied ironically, "but we are very well settled here. Furthermore," continued Richard, pretending not to notice the sarcasm, "I heard you are trying to establish some kind of farming community here. I must warn you that this could create conflicts with municipal zoning regulations." "I have consulted all the necessary regulations," answered Rebecca. "There are no restrictions on family farming in the rural zone." "Family farming, no," said Richard, "but cooperative commercial activity might be different. It could require special permits, environmental impact studies." Rebecca realized Richard was trying to discourage her by creating fictitious bureaucratic obstacles. She decided it was time to show she knew about the real estate project. "Mr. Sanders," she said, looking him directly in the eyes, "I know about the Green Valley real estate development project. I know my property is in the center of the area planned for the residential complex." Richard's expression changed completely. For a moment, he was speechless. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. but his voice sounded much less convincing than usual. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," continued Rebecca, "and I know all these intimidation attempts are illegal. My lawyer is already preparing a lawsuit for coercion." Richard tried to regain his composure. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think there's a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding," interrupted Rebecca. "You want my property to make your project viable, but I'm not interested in selling. Please stop coming here with fake concerns and veiled threats." After this confrontation, Richard disappeared for a few weeks, and Rebecca took advantage of the peace to accelerate the project's development even further. With the help of the other cooperative families, she managed to implement a more efficient irrigation system and began preparing areas for each family's specialties. The property was transforming from an abandoned plot into a small, organized, and productive farm. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The children were loving their new life. Brandon had become an enthusiastic farmhand, learning about different soil types and planting techniques. Tyler developed a special interest in the bees the bakers had brought to the property. Emma Grace loved taking care of the chickens that Carol Collins had suggested adding to the project. Even little Ethan, who was now 10 months old, seemed healthier and happier in the rural environment. He crawled freely on the safe lawns of the property and slept better with the clean air and natural sounds of country life. The transformation in the family's life was evident to everyone who knew their previous situation. Mrs. Eleanor commented several times on how the children seemed more confident and how Rebecca had regained the sparkle in her eyes. "You've found your true home," she said one day, watching the children play while Rebecca harvested the first vegetables from the project. It was during this period of relative peace that Rebecca made a discovery that would change everything again. She was cleaning the attic of the main house when she found a box with more of Daniel's documents. This time they weren't letters or agricultural plans. They were legal documents showing that Daniel had acquired not only the main property, but also 3 adjacent plots of land he had secretly purchased over the previous 2 years. The map attached to the documents showed that the 4 properties together formed an area of almost 50,000 square meters, 5 times larger than Rebecca had imagined. More importantly, the total area included a natural spring and a small waterfall that Daniel had kept secret. The discovery of water meant the property had the potential to be completely self-sustaining in terms of irrigation. Rebecca ran to tell the discovery to Mrs. Eleanor, who was equally surprised. "Daniel really thought of everything," said the elderly woman. "With this amount of land and its own water source, you can develop a much larger project than I imagined. But why didn't he tell me about the other properties?" "Perhaps because he wanted to make sure everything would work out before revealing the full extent of the plan," suggested Mrs. Eleanor. "Or perhaps he wanted you to discover it gradually so you wouldn't feel overwhelmed." The discovery of the additional land also revealed why Richard was so desperate to acquire the property. Without all 4 lots together, it would be impossible to build the planned residential complex. Rebecca decided to use this information as a final weapon against Richard's advances. She asked Dr. Andrew to prepare an official notification stating she was aware of all the properties left by Daniel and had no interest in negotiating any of them. The notification was delivered directly to the Green Valley Real Estate Development Office, and the effect was immediate. The next day, Richard appeared at the property accompanied by 2 men in suits who introduced themselves as lead investors in the project. "Mrs. Baker," said one of them, a man of about 60 with graying hair, "my name is Edward Foster. I am a senior partner at Green Valley Development. I've come here to make a final offer." "I'm not interested in offers," Rebecca replied firmly. "You haven't even heard what I have to offer," said Edward, maintaining a respectful but firm tone. "I am prepared to offer $1,200,000 for the 4 properties. Rebecca felt her heart race. It was an amount far beyond what she had imagined the land could be worth. "It's a generous offer," Edward continued, "but there is a deadline. We need an answer within 48 hours. After this deadline, we will pursue other alternatives." "What kind of alternatives?" asked Rebecca suspiciously. Well, there are several legal ways to enable urban development projects, Edward replied vaguely. Eminent domain for public use, for example. The threat was subtle but clear. If Rebecca didn't accept the voluntary sale, they would find a way to force an eminent domain proceeding. After the men left, Rebecca spent the night awake thinking about the offer. $1,200,000 was enough money to buy an excellent property anywhere in the United States and still have a significant amount left for investments. But it also meant abandoning the dream that Daniel had built so carefully. It meant giving up on the cooperative community that was just beginning to flourish. It meant taking the children out of an environment where they were finally happy and stable. The next morning, she gathered all the families from the cooperative to discuss the situation. The meeting took place in the backyard of the main house, with the children playing nearby while the adults talked. "We need to be realistic," said Robert Collins. "It's a very large sum of money. Rebecca, you have 4 children to raise. This money would secure the college future for all of them." "On the other hand," argued Carol, "we are building something very special here. It's not just about money. It's about a lifestyle, about values we want to pass on to our children." Mr. Baker, the beekeeper, had a practical perspective. The question is, can they actually force an eminent domain? And if they can, how much would Rebecca receive in compensation? Rebecca had researched this with Dr. Andrew Richards. In the case of eminent domain, the compensation would be based on the assessed value of the properties, which would be much lower than the current offer, probably a third of what they're offering. "So our choice is between accepting the generous offer or risking forced eminent domain," summarized Mrs. Miller. "Not necessarily," said Rebecca. "There's a third option I've been considering." She explained the idea that had matured during her sleepless night. Instead of selling the entire property, she could negotiate the sale of a portion of it, keeping enough area to continue the cooperative project. "With the documents I found, I discovered that the water spring is located on the westernmost property," explained Rebecca, showing the map. "If we sell the 2 properties on the east side, we still keep 25,000 square meters, including the water source and the main house." The proposal was met with enthusiasm by the group. It would be possible to maintain the cooperative project on a slightly smaller, but still viable scale, while Rebecca would receive a significant sum for the partial sale. Dr. Andrew Richards was consulted about the legal feasibility of the proposal. "It's perfectly feasible," he said. "You maintain control over your property while offering a solution that allows the real estate development to proceed, even if on a reduced scale." Rebecca decided to present the counteroffer to Edward Foster. She called the Green Valley Real Estate Development Office and scheduled a meeting for the next day. "Mr. Foster," she said during the meeting, "I am willing to negotiate, but not on the terms you proposed. I am offering the sale of 2 of the 4 properties for $600,000. Edward seemed surprised by the counteroffer. "Mrs. Mitchell, I don't know if that would be feasible for our project. We need the complete area." "Actually, I consulted the project approved by the city," said Rebecca, showing she had done her homework. "With some modifications to the layout, it's possible to build the residential complex on the 2 properties on the east side, perhaps with 100 homes instead of 200, but it would still be a profitable project." Edward asked for time to consult his partners and architects. 3 days later, he returned with a counter-proposal. "We offer $700,000 for the 2 properties, but on the condition that you sign an agreement committing not to develop any activities that could compete with our venture." Rebecca understood they wanted to prevent the agricultural cooperative from becoming a tourist attraction that could interfere with the exclusivity of the luxury condominium. "What kind of restrictions?" she asked. "No direct sales to the public, no agritourism, no events or activities that attract outside visitors," specified Edward. Rebecca considered the restrictions. They wouldn't prevent the cooperative from producing for distribution through intermediaries, which had been Daniel's original plan anyway. "I accept the conditions," she finally said, "but I want $800,000. Edward hesitated for a moment, then extended his hand. "Deal." The sale of the 2 properties was completed in 6 weeks. Rebecca deposited the money in secure investments that would guarantee a stable monthly income for the family, while also maintaining a reserve for investments in the remaining property. With financial resources secured and external pressure eliminated, the agricultural cooperative could develop without interference. During the following year, the project flourished exactly as Daniel had predicted. The specialized blackberries produced exceptionally high-quality fruit that was sold to gourmet restaurants in Los Angeles and New York at premium prices. The fruit trees rescued from neglect produced mango, jaboticaba, and Suriname cherry in quantities that surprised even Mr. Charles. The Collins family established an organic vegetable garden that supplied not only the cooperative's needs, but also generated surplus for sale. The Baker family's apiary produced a honey with a unique flavor, a result of the region's specific wildflowers. The children grew up integrated into the project, developing practical skills and a deep connection with nature. Brandon, now 11, could already identify dozens of plant varieties and had developed an interest in studying agronomy in the future. Tyler had become a junior expert in beekeeping, able to help Mr. Baker with all the apiary's activities. Emma Grace, at 7 years old, had developed a special talent for caring for the property's animals and had convinced her mother to adopt 2 abandoned dogs that appeared on the land. Ethan, already walking and speaking his first words, was growing up as a country child, playing in the dirt, observing insects, and falling asleep to the sound of birds. Mrs. Eleanor had become like a grandmother to the children and an inseparable friend to Rebecca. She had moved into the small house that originally served as a storage shed, renovated specifically for her, and had become a key part of the cooperative project with her experience and wisdom. A year and a half after arriving at the property, Rebecca received a letter that moved her deeply. It was from an ecotourism company interested in establishing a partnership for educational visits to the cooperative. "Mrs. Baker," wrote the company's director, "we have learned about the cooperative project you are developing, and were impressed with the results achieved. We would like to discuss the possibility of including your property in an educational tourism itinerary about sustainable agriculture." Rebecca remembered the restrictions she had signed regarding tourism activities, but Dr. Andrew reassured her, "Educational tourism with prior scheduling and small groups does not constitute the commercial activity restricted in the contract. You can receive groups for educational visits without any problems." The partnership with the ecotourism company proved to be another success. Groups of students and families interested in sustainable agriculture visited the property every 2 weeks, generating a modest but significant additional income. During one of these visits, Rebecca met Marcus Anderson, a retired agronomist who was fascinated with the project. "In 30 years of profession, I have rarely seen such well-executed planning," he said. "Your husband really knew what he was doing." Marcus offered to provide voluntary consulting to the project, helping to further optimize production and diversify crops. With his guidance, Rebecca introduced the cultivation of aromatic herbs that adapted perfectly to the property's microclimate. It was Marcus who suggested that Rebecca document the entire cooperative development process. This project could serve as a model for other families interested in cooperative family farming, he said. "You have an inspiring story that deserves to be shared." Rebecca began writing a detailed project journal, recording not only the technical aspects of farming, but also the personal discoveries, the challenges overcome, and the lessons learned. The journal became a therapy, a way to process all the transformation her life had undergone. By writing about the journey, she fully understood Daniel's wisdom in keeping the project secret initially. If he had revealed all the plans at once, she probably would have considered the project too risky, especially with 4 young children. But discovering everything gradually, facing each challenge as it arose, she had developed the confidence and skills needed to run the project alone. Daniel had known exactly how to guide her so she could take control when necessary. 2 years after arriving at the property, Rebecca organized a party to celebrate the cooperative's anniversary. All the participating families were present, along with Mrs. Eleanor, Dr. Andrew, Marcus, and several other people who had become part of the extended community. During the party, Rebecca stepped onto a small makeshift platform and gave a speech that surprised everyone. "When we arrived here 2 years ago," she said emotionally, I thought I was facing the worst crisis of my life. I had lost my partner, I was forced to live on a property that seemed completely uninhabitable, and I didn't know how I was going to support my children. What I didn't know was that Daniel had planted here much more than seeds. He had planted hope, possibilities, a future I couldn't see at that moment. Today, looking at everything we've built together, I understand that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the greatest challenges. This property wasn't a problematic inheritance, it was a carefully planned gift. Daniel knew that alone, I would never have the courage to leave the security of the city to try this life. But he also knew that if I were forced by circumstances to try, I would discover I had the strength not only to survive, but to thrive. Thank you to everyone who helped us on this journey. Thank you for believing in Daniel's dream and for making it a reality with us. The party lasted late into the night, with music, dancing, and many stories shared. The children played freely in the gardens they themselves had helped to plant, while the adults celebrated not only the project's success, but the genuine community that had formed. That night, after everyone had left and the children had fallen asleep, Rebecca walked alone through the property by moonlight. She observed the orderly rows of plants, listened to the gentle sound of the waterfall, smelled the scent of the flowers perfuming the night air. For a moment, she could almost feel Daniel's presence beside her, silently approving all she had managed to build. It wasn't exactly the life they had planned together, but it was a good life, a full life, connected to the land and to values that truly mattered. Rebecca smiled, knowing she finally fully understood the last message Daniel had left for her. To trust herself, to trust the love he had planted in every detail of that project, and to trust that it was possible to build something beautiful and lasting, even from the most difficult circumstances. The widow who had arrived there 2 years earlier, desperate and lost, had transformed into a community leader, a competent farmer, a confident mother, and a woman who knew exactly what her place in the world was. 3 years after arriving at the property, Rebecca received a visit from a journalist interested in writing about successful family farming projects. The article, published in a nationally circulated magazine, brought recognition to the project and inspired other families to start similar ventures. "How do you assess the decision to follow the plan left by your husband?" asked the journalist during the interview. "Initially, it was a decision of survival," Rebecca answered. "I had no other options. But today I understand it was the best decision of my life, not just for the financial security the project brought us, but mainly for the kind of life it made possible for my children." What were the biggest challenges? "The biggest challenge was overcoming fear," said Rebecca thoughtfully. "Fear of failure, fear of not being able to do it alone, fear of making the wrong decisions for the children. But I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of fear." The magazine article brought visits from municipal and state authorities interested in promoting the project as a model of sustainable rural development. Rebecca received invitations to speak at events about family farming and community development. But the recognition that moved her the most came on an ordinary afternoon, when Brandon came home from school with an essay he had written about my family. In the essay, he wrote, "My mom is the bravest person I know. When my dad left, she could have given up on everything, but she decided to fight. She took a place that seemed hopeless and turned it into a paradise where I loved to live. She taught me that when we truly love something, we find the strength to protect it and make it grow, even when it seems impossible." Reading that essay, Rebecca understood she had given her children much more than financial security. She had demonstrated in practice that it's possible to rebuild life after the most difficult losses, that it's possible to turn challenges into opportunities, that it's possible to create beauty and abundance even in the most adverse circumstances. 4 years after arriving, the property had become a small paradise of biodiversity and productivity. The main house, completely restored, comfortably accommodated the family. The land, once overrun by wild vegetation, now housed an impressive variety of crops, organized in harmony with the natural landscape. The children had developed exceptionally. Brandon, now 13, had become Rebecca's right hand in the technical management of the property. Tyler, at 11, was responsible for animal care and had developed a special interest in veterinary medicine. Emma Grace, at 9, showed artistic talent and spent hours drawing the plants and animals on the property. Ethan, at 4, was growing up as a happy wild child, knowing every corner of the land and every animal in the area. During the 4th year, Rebecca made an important decision. It was time to fully honor Daniel's memory by creating something permanent that would perpetuate his vision. With the help of the other families in the cooperative and support from the City Hall, she established the Daniel Mitchell Institute for Sustainable Family Farming, a non-profit organization dedicated to teaching and promoting cooperative family farming techniques. The institute offered free courses for families interested in starting their own farming projects, provided technical consulting and specialized seeds, and maintained an exchange program between rural cooperatives. The official inauguration of the institute was marked by an emotional ceremony where Rebecca planted a yellow ipe sapling in honor of Daniel. The tree was planted at the center of the property in a location visible from all points of the land. "This tree will grow alongside all the dreams we still have to fulfill," said Rebecca during the ceremony. "Just as Daniel planted dreams we continue to harvest, today we plant dreams that future generations will harvest." Mrs. Eleanor, now 82 years old but still active and sharp, gave a speech that moved everyone present. "I have known 3 generations of the Baker family on this property. I saw Daniel's grandmother build a home here full of love and abundance. I saw Daniel as a boy absorbing those teachings and dreaming of rebuilding it all. And now I see Rebecca and the children not just rebuilding, but creating something even greater, something that will benefit families we don't even know yet." 5 years after their arrival, Rebecca received an unexpected proposal. The Department of Agricultural Development wanted to use the project as a model for a national program supporting cooperative family farming. "Mrs. Baker," said the department's representative, "your project has demonstrated that it's possible to create sustainable rural prosperity with relatively low investment and high community participation. We would like to replicate this model in other regions of the country." The proposal included funding to expand the institute and technical support to establish similar cooperatives in other states. It was an opportunity to honor Daniel's memory on a national scale. Rebecca agreed to participate in the program, but on one condition, that the project always maintain its characteristic as a community initiative without becoming a governmental bureaucratic structure. During the following 2 years, Rebecca traveled across the country helping to establish family farming cooperatives. Always accompanied by 1 or 2 of the other families from the original project, she shared not only technical knowledge but, most importantly, the philosophy of cooperation and sustainability she had learned from Daniel. The travels taught her about the diversity of American agriculture and strengthened her conviction that family farming is a viable solution for many of the country's social and economic problems. Each established cooperative had its own characteristics, adapted to the local climate and culture, but all shared the basic principles Daniel had embedded in the original project: environmental sustainability, cooperation among families, and a focus on quality over quantity. 7 years after arriving at the property, Rebecca organized a special meeting with all the families from the original cooperative. It was time to make an important decision about the project's future. "We have reached a point where our project has surpassed everything Daniel originally imagined," she said, opening the meeting. "Now we have to decide how we want it to continue growing." The options were several: expand the cooperative by including more families, focus on the teaching institute, develop research on sustainable agriculture, or simply maintain the project at its current size, prioritizing quality of life over growth. After lengthy discussions, the group reached a consensus. They would keep the cooperative at its current size, focusing on perfecting methods and the quality of life of the families involved, while the institute would handle expansion and teaching. Daniel always said the important thing wasn't to have the biggest farm, but to have the happiest farm, Rebecca recalled. "I think we've gotten there." During the 8th year, Rebecca faced her first major personal challenge since the early days on the property. Brandon, now 16 years old, expressed interest in studying agronomy at a university in New York. "Mum, I want to study so I can contribute even more to the project," he said. But I also want to learn about other realities, learn about large-scale agriculture, understand how we can make a difference on a larger level. At first, Rebecca felt afraid of losing her eldest son and her main helper, but she soon understood that supporting her children's educational dreams was a fundamental part of the project she and Daniel had built. "Your father always dreamed that you would have educational opportunities he never had," she said to Brandon. "Go study, learn everything you can, and then decide how you want to apply that knowledge." Brandon's departure for university was difficult for the whole family, but it also marked a new phase of maturity for the project. Tyler, now 14, took on more responsibilities, and Emma Grace, at 12, proved to be a natural administrator, helping Rebecca with financial and logistical management. Ethan, at 7, had become a sort of project mascot, charming visitors with his impressive knowledge of the local flora and fauna. During the first year of Brandon's absence, Rebecca received regular letters telling about his studies and his discoveries about modern agriculture. Some techniques he learned at university were incorporated into the project through his suggestions. At the end of his first university year, Brandon returned for the holidays with a research project approved by the university. He wanted to study the methods developed at the cooperative and compare them with conventional farming techniques. "Mom, our project is more advanced in sustainability than many farms we studied at university," he said, excited. "I think we can publish scientific papers about our methods." Brandon's research resulted in 3 scientific papers published in specialized journals, bringing academic recognition to the methods developed on the property. 9 years after their arrival, Rebecca decided to write a book telling the whole story of the project. "It's not just the story of our family," she explained to the children. "It's the story of how it's possible to rebuild a life, of how it's possible to transform challenges into opportunities." The book, titled Daniel's Seeds: How One Man Planted His Family's Future, was published by a publisher specializing in agriculture and rural development and became a reference for families interested in family farming. After the book's publication, Rebecca began receiving letters from families across the country reporting how the story had inspired their own projects. Some letters were particularly touching, coming from widows who had found the courage to rebuild their lives after reading about Rebecca's journey. During the 10th year, the property received its official certification as a Model Property in Sustainable Agriculture from the Department of Agriculture. The certification recognized not only the technical methods employed, but also the project's social contribution to the rural community of the region. The certification ceremony was held on the property itself, with the presence of government officials, researchers, and representatives from other cooperatives that had been established based on the model developed there. This property demonstrates that family farming can be simultaneously productive, sustainable, and socially responsible, said the secretary during the ceremony. It is an example of what rural America can become when we combine tradition, innovation, and cooperation. For Rebecca, the certification represented more than official recognition. It was confirmation that she had completely honored Daniel's vision, creating something that surpassed even his original dreams. That night, alone on the porch of the main house, Rebecca remembered the entire journey. 10 years earlier, she had arrived there as a desperate widow, carrying 4 small children and a few meager possessions. The property was a ruin overgrown with vegetation, seemingly without value or future. Today, that same property was a model of sustainability and prosperity. The children had grown up in safety and happiness. Brandon was graduating in agronomy with academic distinction. Tyler had been accepted into an exchange program to study veterinary medicine in Canada. Emma Grace demonstrated exceptional talent in art and administration. Ethan was growing into a confident child connected with nature. The cooperative comfortably supported 5 families and generated indirect employment for more than 20 people in the region. The Institute had helped establish more than 40 similar cooperatives in 15 U.S. states. But beyond all the measurable successes, Rebecca knew the project's greatest achievement was something far more subtle. It had created a place where her children grew up understanding it is possible to build a life based on cooperation, sustainability, and connection to the land. As she watched the soft lights illuminating the paths between the garden beds, Rebecca smiled, remembering the words Daniel had written in the first letter she found. "This place can be more than a house, Rebecca. It can be a true home." He was right. They had not only created a home, but they had created a legacy that would continue growing far beyond their own lives. In the 11th year, a surprise deeply moved Rebecca. During a renovation in the oldest part of the main house, workers found one last hidden box that had gone unnoticed in all previous searches. The box contained letters from Daniel addressed specifically to each child, to be opened when they turned 18. There was also a final letter for Rebecca, dated just days before his departure. Rebecca opened her letter with trembling hands. "My dearest Rebecca, if you are reading this letter, it means you have found all the pieces of the puzzle I prepared for our family. It means you have faced every challenge, overcome every difficulty, and transformed our dream into reality. I know it must have been difficult, especially in the early days. I know there must have been moments when you thought of giving up, when you questioned my decisions, when you felt betrayed because I didn't tell you everything from the start. I ask for your understanding one last time. I knew you better than anyone else in the world, Rebecca. I knew your strength, your determination, your capacity to love and protect our family. But I also knew your fears and your tendency to seek safety in the familiar. If I had told you about all the plans at once, you would have been frightened by the magnitude of what I was proposing. You would have insisted we choose a safer, more conventional path. But I knew that if circumstances forced you to try, you would discover you were capable of extraordinary things. I knew that once you began to see the results, your own confidence would grow, and you would take on the project as your own. And that's what I wanted most, Rebecca, for the project to become yours, not just an extension of my dreams, but the realization of your own potential. Now, looking from where I am, I see that you have not only fulfilled all my dreams, but expanded them in ways I never imagined. You transformed a farm property into a community, a family project into a social mission, an inheritance into a legacy. The letters for the children contain my dreams for each of them, but I know that under your guidance, they will make choices even better than anything I could have planned. Thank you for trusting me one last time. Thank you for having the courage to try. Thank you for giving our children a life richer than anything I could have offered them. You were the perfect wife while I lived, and became the perfect mother after my departure. Our children were lucky to have you, and I was lucky to have loved you. Forever with gratitude and infinite love, Daniel P.S. In the garden behind the house, I planted a special rose bush on our last wedding anniversary. If you take good care of it, it will bloom every year on our anniversary day. It's my way of always being present in your celebrations of happiness. Rebecca cried as she hadn't cried in years, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. She finally completely understood the depth of the love that had motivated all of Daniel's choices. That afternoon, she went out to look for the rose bush he had mentioned. She found it growing vigorously in a protected corner of the garden near the master bedroom window. It was laden with buds that promised to bloom exactly in the week of their wedding anniversary. The letters for the children were carefully stored to be given at the appropriate times, but Rebecca decided to read them some excerpts from the letter she had received, adapting the language so they could understand the main message. "Daddy wanted you to know that everything we built here was done thinking about your future," she said, gathering the children in the main room. "He believed you deserved to grow up knowing where food comes from, understanding the value of work, connected with nature. But mainly, he wanted you to learn that it's possible to build a life based on love, cooperation, and care for the world around us." Ethan, now 8 years old and old enough to understand more complex concepts, asked a question that surprised Rebecca. "Mommy, did Daddy know he was going to leave when he planted all this?" Rebecca thought carefully before answering. "I think Daddy knew life is uncertain and wanted to make sure that whatever happened you would be protected and have a solid foundation to build your own lives." "So he planted more than seeds," said Emma Grace with her characteristic insight. "He planted an entire future." "Exactly," agreed Rebecca, "and now it's up to us to keep planting, keep growing, keep caring for what he started." In the 12th year, Brandon graduated in agronomy and returned home with an ambitious proposal. He wanted to establish a master's program in sustainable family farming in partnership with the university, using the property as a rural campus. "Mum, imagine if we could bring university students here to study for a few months, learning the methods we developed through practice," he said, excited about the idea. The proposal was presented to the other families in the cooperative and received with enthusiasm. The necessary infrastructure would be funded by the university and research grant agencies, at no cost to the cooperative. Over the next 2 years, the property also transformed into a higher education center. Groups of 15 students spent entire semesters living on the property, learning sustainable agriculture through complete immersion in the project. The presence of the students brought new energy to the project and also new perspectives. Some developed research that resulted in significant technical improvements. Others contributed knowledge about digital marketing that expanded the reach of the cooperative's products. Tyler returned from Canada with a degree in veterinary medicine and specializations in small animal veterinary medicine and livestock sustainability. He established a veterinary clinic on the property that served not only the cooperative's animals, but also pets and production animals from the entire region. Emma Grace, at 16, had developed an impressive artistic project. She documented through paintings and photographs the evolution of the property and the lives of the cooperative families. Her work had been selected for an exhibition in New York on art and rural sustainability. Ethan, at 11, amazed everyone with his encyclopedic knowledge of local biodiversity. He had catalogued over 200 plant species and 100 animal species on the property and collaborated with researchers from the Los Angeles Botanical Garden on studies about preserving native species. In the 14th year, Rebecca received an honor that moved her deeply. She was named Woman of the Year by the National Federation of Rural Workers in recognition of her contribution to the development of family farming in the United States. During the award ceremony, she gave a speech that summarized her entire journey. "When my husband passed away 14 years ago, leaving me with 4 small children and a property that seemed worthless, I thought I was facing the end of my life as I knew it. I didn't know I was actually at the beginning of the most fulfilling and meaningful life I could imagine. Daniel didn't just leave me a property, he left me a mission, to prove that it's possible to build prosperity through cooperation, that it's possible to create abundance through sustainability. But most of all, he left me the opportunity to discover strengths within myself that I didn't know I possessed. He left me the chance to create for our children a childhood connected to the land and to values that truly matter. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to all the families who built this project with me, to all the students who brought new energy and knowledge, to all the other cooperatives that were inspired by our example. Most of all, this award belongs to Daniel, who had the wisdom to plant dreams that would continue growing far beyond his physical presence among us." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Rebecca saw many familiar faces in the crowd, other cooperatives she had helped establish, students who had passed through the property, authorities who had supported the project over the years. That night, in the hotel in Washington where the award ceremony took place, Rebecca called home and spoke at length with each of her children. They were all proud but also eager for her to return soon. "The property isn't the same without you here, Mom," said Brandon. "You are the heart of everything we've built." In the 15th year, Rebecca made a decision that surprised the family. She announced she wanted to begin gradually transferring leadership of the project to her older children. "You grew up with this project," she said during a family meeting. "You know every detail, every principle, every value that has guided our work. It's time for you to take responsibility for the future." Brandon, now 27, took over the technical and academic coordination of the project. Tyler, at 25, became responsible for the veterinary and animal welfare aspects. Emma Grace, at 23, with a degree in farm management, took over financial and commercial management. Ethan, at 18, and about to begin studies in biology, received the first letter that Daniel had written for him. Rebecca handed him the envelope in an intimate ceremony with only the family present. Daniel's letter to Ethan said, "My youngest son, If you are reading this letter at 18, it means you grew up in the paradise I planned for our family. You have had the privilege of growing up connected to nature in a way few young people of your generation have experienced. I hope this privilege transforms into a responsibility, the responsibility to protect and preserve the nature that raised you. Your interest in biology since childhood suggests you intuitively understand this connection. You have the chance to become a bridge between the traditional knowledge you absorbed growing up on the property and the scientific knowledge you will learn at university. This combination could make you a powerful advocate for environmental sustainability. No matter which career you choose, always remember that you grew up learning it's possible to live in harmony with nature without giving up prosperity and happiness. Take that lesson wherever life leads you. With love and anticipated pride, Dad, Ethan cried as he read the letter, but they were tears of gratitude and determination. That night, he talked at length with Rebecca about his plans for the future. Mum, I want to study biology, but I want to focus on how we can use science to make agriculture even more sustainable, he said. I want to continue the work Dad started, but expanding it through scientific research. Rebecca smiled, seeing in her youngest son the same passion for the land that had motivated Daniel decades before. During the 16th year, the property received its first official international visit. A delegation of Japanese farmers came to study the methods developed there for application in similar projects in Japan. We have never seen such a harmonious integration between agricultural productivity and environmental preservation, said the delegation leader through a translator. We would like to establish a permanent exchange between our projects. The exchange with Japan resulted in a valuable sharing of knowledge. The Americans learned refined soil management and space optimization techniques, while the Japanese took away knowledge about tropical biodiversity and family cooperative systems. Emma Grace was chosen to represent the project at an international conference on sustainable agriculture in Tokyo. At 24, she became the event's youngest keynote speaker, presenting the experience of the American cooperative to an audience of over 1,000 experts from 50 countries. In the 17th year, Tyler made a significant scientific discovery. Studying the medicinal plants cultivated on the property, he identified chemical compounds with pharmaceutical potential for treating inflammation in animals. The discovery resulted in a partnership with a pharmaceutical laboratory to develop veterinary medicines based on the property's plants. The royalties from the eventual patent would be divided between the cooperative and a research fund for natural veterinary medicine. Ethan, in his third year of biology, published his first scientific article on the property's biodiversity. The study documented how sustainable farming methods can not only preserve but actively increase local biodiversity. In 17 years, the property has gone from a degraded area with low biological diversity to a rich ecosystem that hosts species that had disappeared from the region, Ethan wrote in the article. In the 18th year, Rebecca decided it was time to fulfill a personal dream she had postponed throughout the property's reconstruction. She wanted to travel and learn about other agricultural cooperatives around the world. You no longer need me to run the project, she told her children. It's time for me to learn from other experiences and perhaps find new ideas for when I return. For 6 months, Rebecca traveled to countries such as Denmark, New Zealand, Costa Rica, and Israel, studying different models of sustainable agriculture. Each place she visited offered new perspectives on how to combine productivity, sustainability, and rural quality of life. The travels strengthened her conviction that the model developed on the property was truly special. Few places managed to combine economic success, environmental harmony, and family happiness the way they had. When she returned, Rebecca brought ideas for some improvements, but mainly she brought a renewed appreciation for what they had built. I visited impressive projects all over the world, she said at the welcome party, but none had the human warmth, authenticity, and joy I find here every day. In the 19th year, the family organized a special celebration to mark nearly 2 decades since arriving at the property. It was a week-long festival with different activities each day, cultural performances, workshops on sustainable agriculture, artistic exhibitions by Emma Grace, and scientific lectures by Ethan and Brandon. The celebration culminated with the inauguration of the Daniel Mitchell Memorial, a space in the main garden dedicated to preserving the history and teachings of the project. The memorial included the special rosebush Daniel had planted, now grown into an arch over a bench where visitors could sit and contemplate the entire property. During the memorial's inauguration ceremony, Rebecca gave her most emotional speech since the beginning of the journey. "Daniel planted much more than a rosebush in this garden," she said, pointing to the flowers blooming exuberantly. "He planted a philosophy of life, a way of seeing the world, a way of building family and community. This rose bush blooms every year on our wedding anniversary, reminding me that true love never dies. It only transforms. The love Daniel felt for our family transformed into this place, these plants, these friendships, these values we pass on to our children. Today, inaugurating this memorial, we are not just honoring Daniel's memory. We are celebrating the continuity of his dreams through all of us who choose to care for and expand what he began." Among those present at the ceremony were representatives from all 43 cooperatives that had been established based on the property's model, over 100 former students from the university program, government officials, and dozens of friends who had become part of the extended family over the years. Mrs. Eleanor, now 91 years old, but still lucid and present, gave the ceremony's final speech. "I knew this property in 3 different phases of its history. In Daniel's grandmother's time, it was a prosperous but traditional farm. Then it lay abandoned for decades, and finally, it was reborn in the hands of Rebecca and the children as something far greater than anything it had ever been before. This is the most important lesson we have learned here, that with love, determination, and cooperation, it is possible not only to rebuild what was lost, but to create something new and better." That night, after all the guests had left, the family gathered on the porch of the main house for an intimate moment of reflection. Rebecca looked around at each of her children, now accomplished adults, and felt a deep peace. Brandon, at 29, had become an internationally recognized expert in sustainable family farming, but continued living on the property and dedicating his life to the project. Tyler, at 27, had established a model of sustainable veterinary medicine that was being replicated in other regions. Emma Grace, at 25, combined her business administration training with her artistic talent to create communication campaigns promoting sustainable agriculture. Ethan, at 20, was developing research that could revolutionize the scientific understanding of the relationship between agriculture and biodiversity. "You have surpassed all the dreams your father had for you," said Rebecca, her voice filled with emotion. "But most importantly, you have become good people who use your talents to improve the world." "That's what we learned from both of you," said Brandon. "Dad left us a project, but you taught us how to turn a project into a life's mission." "And you taught me," Rebecca replied, "that the greatest reward of being a mother is seeing your children become better people than we ever were." At that moment, sitting on the porch surrounded by her children and looking at the property illuminated by the full moon, Rebecca understood she had completely fulfilled the mission Daniel had left for her. Not only had she preserved and expanded his project, but she had created a legacy that would continue to grow for generations. The desperate widow who had arrived there 20 years earlier, with 4 small children and a few possessions, had transformed into the matriarch of a prosperous and fulfilled family, the founder of a sustainable agriculture movement that benefited thousands of families, and the creator of a model of life that proved it was possible to combine prosperity, happiness, and environmental responsibility. But beyond all the measurable successes, Rebecca knew her greatest achievement was sitting around her on that porch. 4 children who had grown up understanding that true wealth comes from love of family, care for the land, and dedication to causes greater than ourselves. Looking at the stars in the clear rural sky, Rebecca whispered a final gratitude to her husband. "Thank you, Daniel, for giving me the opportunity to discover I was capable of much more than I ever imagined. Thank you for planting in me the courage to rebuild our life and create a better future for our children." The special rose bush swayed gently in the night breeze, almost as if it were silently approving everything that had grown around it. The scent of the flowers mixed with the aromas of ripe fruit and herbs from the garden, creating the unique essence of that place which had become much more than a house. It had become a true home, exactly as Daniel had foreseen in the first letter he left for Rebecca. A place where love had turned into abundance, where dreams had become reality, where a family had discovered it is possible to build paradise on earth through work, dedication, and above all, love. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story and where you are listening from. If this journey of Rebecca's overcoming touched your heart, leave your sincere comment. Do you believe she made the right decisions? Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.